The High Middle Ages or High Medieval period was the period of European history around the 11th, 12th, and 13th centuries. The High Middle Ages were preceded by the Early Middle Ages and followed by the Late Middle Ages, which by convention end around 1500. The key historical trend of the High Middle Ages was the rapidly increasing population of Europe, which brought about great social and political change from the preceding era, the Renaissance of the 12th century, including the first developments of rural exodus and urbanization. By 1250 the robust population increase greatly benefited the European economy, reaching levels it would not see again in some areas until the 19th century. This trend was checked in the late Middle Ages by a series of calamities, notably the Black Death, but also including numerous wars and economic stagnation. From about the year 780 onwards, Europe saw the last of the barbarian invasions and became more socially and politically organized. The Carolingian Renaissance led to scientific and philosophical revival of Europe. The first universities were established in Bologna, Paris, Oxford and Modena. The Vikings had settled in the British Isles, France and elsewhere, whilst Norse Christian kingdoms were developing in their Scandinavian homelands. The Magyars had ceased their expansion in the 10th century, and by the year 1000, a Christian kingdom of Hungary was recognized in Central Europe, forming alliances with regional powers. With the brief exception of the Mongol invasions in the 13th century, major nomadic incursions ceased. The powerful Byzantine Empire of the Macedonian and Komnenos dynasties gradually gave way to resurrected Serbia and Bulgaria and to a successor, Crusade state from 1204 to 1261, while countering the continuous threat of the Seljuk Turks in Asia Minor. In the 11th century, populations north of the Alps began to settle new lands, some of which had reverted to wilderness after the end of the Roman Empire. In what is known as the Great Clearances, vast forests and marshes of Europe were cleared and cultivated. At the same time, settlements moved beyond the traditional boundaries of the Frankish Empire to new frontiers in Europe beyond the Elbe River, tripling the size of Germany in the process. The Catholic Church, reaching the peak of its political power at this time, called armies from across Europe to a series of crusades against the Seljuk Turks, who occupied the Holy Land, thereby founding the Crusader states in the Levant. Other wars led to the Northern Crusades, while Christian kingdoms conquered the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors, and the Normans colonized southern Italy, all part of the major population increase and resettlement pattern of the era. The High Middle Ages produced many different forms of intellectual, spiritual and artistic works. This age saw the rise of ethnocentrism, which evolved later into modern civic nationalisms in most of Europe, the ascent of the great Italian city-states, and the rise and fall of the Muslim civilization of Al-Andalus. The rediscovery of the works of Aristotle led Thomas Aquinas and other thinkers of the period to develop scholasticism, a combination of Catholicism and ancient philosophy. For much of the time period, Constantinople remained Europe's most populous city, and Byzantine art reached a peak in the 12th century. In architecture, many of the most notable Gothic cathedrals were built or completed during this era. The crisis of the late Middle Ages, beginning at the start of the 14th century, marks the end of this era. Historical events and politics. Great Britain and Ireland in England. The Norman conquest of 1066 resulted in a kingdom ruled by a francophone nobility. The Normans invaded Ireland by force in 1169 and soon established themselves throughout most of the country, although their stronghold was the southeast. Likewise, Scotland and Wales were subdued to vassalage at about the same time, though Scotland later asserted its independence. The Exchequer was founded in the 12th century under King Henry I, and the first parliaments were convened. In 1215, after the loss of Normandy, King John signed the Magna Carta into law, which limited the power of English monarchs. Scandinavia. From the mid-10th to the mid-11th centuries, the Scandinavian kingdoms were unified and Christianized, resulting in an end of Viking raids, and greater involvement in European politics. King Cnut of Denmark ruled over both England and Norway. After Cnut's death in 1035, England and Norway were lost, and with the defeat of Valdemar II in 1227, Danish predominance in the region came to an end. Meanwhile, Norway extended its Atlantic possessions, ranging from Greenland to the Isle of Man, while Sweden, under Birger Jarl, built up a power base in the Baltic Sea. However, the Norwegian influence started to decline already in the same period, marked by the Treaty of Perth of 1266. Also, civil wars raged in Norway between 1130 and 1240. France and Germany. By the time of the High Middle Ages, the Carolingian Empire had been divided and replaced by separate successor kingdoms called France and Germany, although not with their modern boundaries. Germany was under the banner of the Holy Roman Empire, which reached its high-water mark of unity and political power. Georgia. During successful reign of David the Builder, Kingdom of Georgia gained independence from Turkish rule. David's decisive victory in Battle of Didgori against famous Ilgazi, Georgia captured Tbilisi, what led to Golden Age of the nation. The 27th of March 1184 to 18 January 1213, Queen Tamar was successful in neutralizing this opposition and embarked on an energetic foreign policy aided by the decline of the hostile Seljuk Turks. Relying on a powerful military elite, Tamar was able to build on the successes of her predecessors to consolidate an empire which dominated the Caucasus until its collapse under the Mongol attacks within 2 decades after Tamar's death. Hungary. In the High Middle Ages, the Kingdom of Hungary became one of the most powerful medieval states in Central Europe and Western Europe. King Saint Stephen I of Hungary introduced Christianity to the region. He was remembered by the contemporary chroniclers as a very religious monarch, with wide knowledge in Latin grammar, strict with his own people but kind to the foreigners. He eradicated the remnants of the tribal organization in the kingdom and forced the people to sedentarize and adopt the Christian religion, ethics, way of life, and founded the Hungarian medieval state, organizing it politically in counties using the Germanic system as a model. The following monarchs usually kept a close relationship with Rome, like Saint Ladislaus I of Hungary, and a tolerant attitude with the pagans that escaped to the kingdom searching for sanctuary, which eventually created certain discomfort for some popes. With entering in personal union with the Kingdom of Croatia and annexation of other small states, Hungary became a small empire that extended its control over the Balkans and all the Carpathian region. The Hungarian royal house was the one that gave the most saints to the Catholic Church during medieval times. Poland and Lithuania. During the High Middle Ages, Poland emerged as a kingdom. Spain and Italy. Much of the Iberian Peninsula had been occupied by the Moors after 711, although the northernmost portion was divided between several Christian states. In the 11th century, and again in the 13th, the Christian kingdoms of the north gradually drove the Muslims from central and most of southern Iberia. In Italy, independent city-states grew affluent on eastern maritime trade. These were in particular the thalassocracies of Pisa, Amalfi, Genoa and Venice. Southeastern Europe. Main articles: Byzantine Empire, Second Bulgarian Empire, Serbian Grand Principality, Principality of Arbanon, Banat of Bosnia, and Kingdom of Croatia. The High Middle Ages saw the heightened decline of the Slavic state of Kievan Rus and emergence of Cumania. Later, the Mongol invasion in the 13th century had great impact on the east of Europe, as many countries of the region were invaded, pillaged, conquered or vassalized. During the first half of this period, the Byzantine Empire dominated the Balkans. and under the Comnenian emperors there was a revival of prosperity and urbanization. However, the domination of southeastern Europe came to an end with the successful Vlach-Bulgarian rebellion in 1185, and henceforth the region was divided between the Byzantines in Greece, some parts of Macedonia, and Thrace, the Bulgarians in Moesia and most of Thrace and Macedonia, and the Serbs to the northwest. Eastern and Western churches had formally split in the 11th century, and despite occasional periods of cooperation during the 12th century, in 1204 the Fourth Crusade treacherously captured Constantinople. This severely damaged the Byzantines, and the power was ultimately weakened by the Seljuks and the rising Ottoman Empire in the 14th–15th century. Climate and agriculture. The medieval warm period, the period from 10th century to about the 14th century in Europe, was a relatively warm and gentle interval ended by the generally colder Little Ice Age. Farmers grew wheat well north into Scandinavia, and wine grapes in northern England, although the maximum expansion of vineyards appears to occur within the Little Ice Age period. During this time, a high demand for wine and steady volume of alcohol consumption inspired a viticulture revolution of progress. This protection from famine allowed Europe's population to increase, despite the famine in 1315 that killed 1.5 million people. This increased population contributed to the founding of new towns and an increase in industrial and economic activity during the period. They also established trade and a comprehensive production of alcohol. Food production also increased during this time as new ways of farming were introduced, including the use of a heavier plow, horses instead of oxen, and a three-field system that allowed the cultivation of a greater variety of crops than the earlier two-field system, notably legumes, the growth of which prevented the depletion of important nitrogen from the soil. The rise of chivalry. Household heavy cavalry became common in the 11th century across Europe, and tournaments were invented. Although the heavy capital investment in horse and armor was a barrier to entry, knighthood became known as a way for serfs to earn their freedom. In the 12th century, the Cluny monks promoted ethical warfare and inspired the formation of orders of chivalry, such as the Templar Knights. Inherited titles of nobility were established during this period. In 13th century Germany, knighthood became another inheritable title, although one of the less prestigious, and the trend spread to other countries. Religion. The Church. The East-West Schism of 1054 formally separated the Christian Church into two parts: Western Catholicism in Western Europe and Eastern Orthodoxy in the East. It occurred when Pope Leo IX and Patriarch Michael I excommunicated each other, mainly over disputes as to the existence of papal authority over the four Eastern Patriarchs, as well as disagreement over the filioque. The Crusades. The Crusades occurred between the 11th and 13th centuries. They were conducted under papal authority with the intent of re-establishing Christian rule in the Holy Land by taking the area from the Muslim Fatimid Caliphate. The Fatimids had captured Palestine in 970 AD, lost it to the Seljuk Turks in 1073 AD and recaptured it in 1098 AD, just before they lost it again in 1099 AD as a result of the First Crusade. Military orders. In the context of the Crusades, monastic military orders were founded that would become the template for the late medieval chivalric orders. The Knights Templar were a Christian military order founded after the First Crusade to help protect Christian pilgrims from hostile locals and highway bandits. The order was deeply involved in banking, and in 1307 Philip the Fair had the entire order arrested in France and dismantled on charges of heresy. The Knights Hospitaller were originally a Christian organization founded in Jerusalem in 1080 to provide care for poor, sick, or injured pilgrims to the Holy Land. After Jerusalem was taken in the First Crusade, it became a religious, military order that was charged with the care and defense of the Holy Lands. After the Holy Lands were eventually taken by Muslim forces, it moved its operations to Rhodes, and later Malta. The Teutonic Knights were a German religious order formed in 1190, in the city of Acre, to both aid Christian pilgrims on their way to the Holy Lands and to operate hospitals for the sick and injured in extrema. After Muslim forces captured the Holy Lands, the order moved to Transylvania in 1211 and later, after being expelled, invaded pagan Prussia with the intention of Christianizing the Baltic region. Yet, before and after the order's main pagan opponent, Lithuania, converted to Christianity, the order had already attacked other Christian nations such as Novgorod in Poland. The Teutonic Knights' powerhold, which became considerable, was broken in 1410, at the Battle of Grunwald, where the order suffered a devastating defeat against a joint Polish-Lithuanian-Russian army. After Grunwald, the order declined in power until 1809, when it was officially dissolved. There were 10 crusades in total. Scholasticism, the new Christian method of learning, was influenced by Anselm of Canterbury from the rediscovery of the works of Aristotle, at first indirectly through medieval Jewish and Muslim philosophy and then through Aristotle's own works brought back from Byzantine and Muslim libraries, and those whom he influenced, most notably Albertus Magnus, Bonaventure and Abelard. Many scholastics believed in empiricism and supporting Roman Catholic doctrines through secular study, reason, and logic. They opposed Christian mysticism, and the Platonist Augustinian belief that the mind is an immaterial substance. The most famous of the scholastics was Thomas Aquinas, who led the move away from the Platonic and Augustinian and towards Aristotelianism. Aquinas developed a philosophy of mind by writing that the mind was at birth a tabula rasa, or that was given the ability to think and recognize forms or ideas through a divine spark. Other notable scholastics included Rosellin, Abelard, Peter Lombard, and Francisco Suarez. One of the main questions during this time was the problem of universals. Prominent opponents of various aspects of the scholastic mainstream included Duns Scotus, William of Ockham, Peter Damian, Bernard of Clairvaux, and the Victorines. Golden Age of monasticism. The late 11th century, early mid-12th century was the height of the Golden Age of Christian monasticism. Benedictine order, black-robed monks, Cistercian order, white-robed monks, Bernard of Clairvaux. Mendicant orders. The 13th century saw the rise of the mendicant orders such as the Franciscans, founded 1209, Carmelites, founded 1206 to 1214, Dominicans, founded 1215, Augustinians, founded 1256. Heretical movements. Christian heresies existed in Europe before the 11th century, but only in small numbers and of local character. In most cases, a rogue priest, or a village returning to pagan traditions. Beginning in the 11th century, however, mass movement heresies appeared. The roots of this can be partially sought in the rise of urban cities, free merchants, and a new money-based economy. The rural values of monasticism held little appeal to urban people who began to form sects more in tune with urban culture. The first large-scale heretical movements in Western Europe originated in the newly urbanized areas such as southern France and northern Italy and were probably influenced by the Bogomils and other dualist movements. These heresies were on a scale the Catholic Church had never seen before. The response was one of elimination for some, and acceptance and integration of others. Catharism was a movement with Gnostic elements that originated around the middle of the 10th century. Branded by the contemporary Roman Catholic Church as heretical, it existed throughout much of Western Europe, but its origination was in Languedoc and surrounding areas in southern France. The name Cathar stems from Greek katharos, pure. One of the first recorded uses is Ecbert von Schonau, who wrote on heretics from Cologne in 1181. Hos Nostra Germania Catharis appellit. The Cathars are also called Albigensians. This name originates from the end of the 12th century, and was used by the chronicler Geoffroy du Breuil of Ajoie in 1181. The name refers to the southern town of Albi. The designation is hardly exact, for the centre was at Toulouse and in the neighbouring districts. The Albigensians were strong in southern France, northern Italy, and the southwestern Holy Roman Empire. The Bogomils were strong in Balkans, and became the official religion supported by the Bosnian kings. Dualists believed that historical events were the result of struggle between a good force and an evil force, and that evil ruled the world, though it could be controlled or defeated through asceticism and good works. Albigensian Crusade, Simon de Montfort, Montesquieu, Query Biz. Waldensians. Peter Waldo of Lyon was a wealthy merchant who gave up his riches around 1175 after a religious experience and became a preacher. He founded the Waldensians, which became a Christian sect believing that all religious practices should have scriptural basis. Waldo was denied the right to preach his sermons by the Third Lateran Council in 1179, which he did not obey, and continued to speak freely until he was excommunicated in 1184. Waldo was critical of the Christian clergy, saying they did not live according to the word. He rejected the practice of selling indulgences, as well as the common saint cult practices of the day.